just started about 8 months ago, but one thing that we do at SDSU that we've always done, and I want to increase awareness about, is we do variety testing or crop performance testing. And we do that in multiple crops. So for example, corn hybrid testing. We have 404 entries of corn hybrids in the trials at 7 locations: Mueller, Geddes, Bancroft, Aberdeen, South Shore, Volga, Beresford, hoping to move west. That's why we added Mueller. And those are the same locations we have for soybeans. All that information, corn, soybean, wheat, winter wheat, spring wheat, grain sorghum, field peas, Kathy, Grady with sunflowers, all that is within iGrow and on the variety testing or crop performance testing. And there's a couple ways to get to it. One is just to search variety testing in the iGrow search. Another ways to get to it is with the Facebook page. If you look at the top of the handout, it's a Facebook page, not a profile, so it's like a web page. You don't have to be on Facebook. You don't have to like it. It's essentially like a website, and there's a nice yield data button at the towards the top that you can click on. It'll bring you to all the yield results for all the different crops within the iGrow website. So that's a very easy way to find the results. These are things we do every year. What I have here is field pea variety testing on one side, grain sorghum on the other. Not yields with here, but just a list of what's tested. So we have 10 companies and 53 hybrids of grain sorghum being tested here at Dakota Lakes. We also have a location at Kennebec and a location at Wall. And I've had interest from people all the way from McLaughlin that are interested in growing sorghum in the state. A producer up there has 200 acres. The main limitation we run into here is just yield performance difference with grain sorghum because of the shorter growing season that we deal with here versus where a lot of the grain sorghum is bred in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. So getting to maturity is an issue. And so we are assessing a lot of different hybrids. Most of the hybrids in the trials haven't been tested here, and there's new material. For example, DeKalb has a new early hybrid that's in the trials. I'll be very interested to see how it performs this year. So that's a list on one side. On the other is the field peas. We have both yellow and green. There's 23 varieties here at the plots, and we have 5 locations. We have 2 up in the northwest at Ralph and Bison. Then we have 1 at Wall, 1 here at Dakota Lakes, which we'll point out, and then we have 1 at Blunt, closer to where the Herald plant that will eventually be processing peas. The nice thing about field peas, and Dwayne will talk about it, and grain sorghum, there's some interesting things. One, grain sorghum, it's water use threshold. So the amount of grain that you need, the amount of rain you need, or soil moisture both, to produce a bushel is about, once you get about 6.9 inches. For corn, it's 10.9. So you're talking 4-inch difference in water requirement before you start having something that's harvestable. So if you're 4 inches short, and the yield increase for each additional inch of moisture generally with sorghum is about 10. So you could have 40 bushel sorghum and 0 bushel corn. Another nice thing about grain sorghum is it's not a host for corn rootworm. And so there's a lot of nice things about grain sorghum, and it diversifies when planting can be done. You need about a soil temp around 65 to get some good, nice emergence with that. With the field peas, again, a cool season broadleaf. A lot of that goes in April, early April. Most of our trials were in, and we'll see those fields. There are already pods on them, and they are looking pretty good on the dryland fields. And we have actually the field peas at Wall look great this year. Doing really well, and didn't have the cheat grass problem that we had with the oats that are right next to it. So that's the one. Another thing I'll hand out here, spring wheat. We don't have any spring wheat trials here, but you probably have some acres of spring wheat planted here and there. Same thing, we have 45 varieties in the trials. Some of those are experimental, a lot of those are private and public entries. Something new that we're doing, we're working with a new small grains plant pathologist, Shakad Ali, and he has been, I gave all 45 varieties to him, and he this spring screened that material for different diseases. So now we have the same person screening all the material with the same rating system, the same methodology to compare apples to apples on these spring wheat varieties. And so one of the things he's looked at is leaf rust, tan spot, Stegnospora, another one, and then the last one, it's blank. When you'll see it, it's on the very back, or the second page. But bacterial leaf streak, we're starting to see more of that in spring wheat, and it's not something you can control with fungicides. he's in the process of getting that data to me. So we'll have bacterial leaf streak ratings for spring wheat in South Dakota. Also on here, every year we come up with a recommended list of spring wheat, and the same thing for winter wheat varieties for the state. Those recommendations, there's a map of South Dakota with each adaptation region, and we make specific recommendations for where those spring wheat varieties, where we think they're going to perform best. And that's based on yield trials. We have 9 locations for spring wheat. We have 15 for winter wheat. We're going to have a little less winter wheat data this year due to some locations we lost, especially some winter wheat that went in low residue fields. Was the areas where we had biggest problem stuff, maybe following field peas. We had one field where we had some wind erosion problems and lost that location. So new disease ratings and recommendations. So I have a brief description here about each of the recommended spring wheat varieties, some new ones that we have out of the SDSU program, Advance and Forefront. Advance, if I've had some guys call me that want to look at high yield spring wheat environments, and they're wondering what in that environment is going to yield well. Advance, Thaler, Albany are 3 spring wheats. When you're talking 80 bushel yield levels in spring wheat, those do perform well. They do pull away from the rest, but that's not most of the environments that we deal with. So I just wanted to make that point as well. And again, disease management. One of the nice things about spring wheat and winter wheat is we're trying to improve our characterization of their tolerance or resistance to diseases. So you know, if you're planting winter wheat after spring wheat, maybe you're a little more concerned about tan spot and fusarium. What winter wheat should we maybe consider for those environments? And again, the yield results are there for both East River and West River. Last one. And we'll make a stop. We have the winter wheat variety trials here, and you will see it on our tour, and we'll probably stop a little bit, and I might elaborate on that as well. Oh, on the spring wheat, if you're interested in what varieties we're testing on the Facebook page, I've already posted what varieties we're testing, what all of 45 are there, and then on the back of this sheet is some of the new releases as well that are new in the trials as well. For winter wheat, the very first page, as that handout's getting around, Dakota Lakes Research Farm, far right column on the first page are the yield results. We had some pretty impressive yields, 90 bushel. We had stuff in the trials, both ART and SY Wolf, which are both Syngenta or AgroPro releases. We're at 102 and 103 bushels here in the trials. Anything above 94 bushels was in the top performing yield group last year here at Dakota Lakes, and what that means is when I get those 4 replications, so each variety, let's say ART, is in a 5-foot by 20-foot area, and that's replicated 4 times. That appears 4 times in random across the field, and so that's what we average on. And when we have that type of replication, I can get some good averages and have some confidence intervals and some probabilities. What is the top performing winter wheats for this location last year? And so anything above 94 was in that top performing yield group. One thing we try to do, besides just showing yield data, is both 2-year averages, 3-year averages. What is consistently a top performing winter wheat for not only for each location, but for across the state? So anytime you see, let's say, let's take one, ART for example. For 2012, top yield for East River was 50% frequency. 50% of the time is in the top performing yield group. In 2011, it was 50, and over 3 years, it was in 67. So anytime you have wheat that consistently performs well on yield in that top performing yield group, that's one thing we consider when we look at what winter wheat that we recommend. As well as disease susceptibility, end use, a lot of things come into play and when we make that recommended list. Ones, I guess, to highlight real quick, Overland over the last 7 years has been the top performing winter wheat in terms of yield across the state. Over the last 2 years has been SY Wolf. So those are 2 good producing winter wheats for South Dakota. Overland was co-released with SDSU. SY Wolf is a little bit newer, has better resistance to tan spot. However, it doesn't have the resistance to fusarium head blight like Overland does. So whenever you think about choosing winter wheat varieties, and when you go to sit down to select your seed, taking that into consideration, what's your rotation, and also maybe what is your previous challenges with diseases, and even on-farm yields from previous wheats, and then you can maybe compare what winter wheat variety you have and see how maybe it's been comparing in the trials to newer varieties. For example, older ones such as Jaggeling, Wesley, there is some newer releases that even have Wesley in their heritage that are performing better. There's some new ones. Ideal is a new winter wheat release in 2011 that we're looking at. It's been performing fairly well. And one of the nice things about Ideal is it is moderately resistant to leaf rust. I did see a little bit of leaf rust here and there on the farm in Alice, and that is one that's moderately susceptible. So that's something to look out for. Stagnospora, I don't have ratings for the winter wheats. I do for spring wheat, but that's something, again, I'm hoping to continue with the small grains plant pathologist and the other pathologist in characterizing the varieties better in South Dakota. So maybe in situations where we have a lot of disease pressure, you might want to consider certain wheat varieties. I can highlight or look at some stuff out in the field on that. Went through that fast, but it's the end of the day. If you guys have questions, again, my contact information is on the top of those sheets. Variety selection is a big deal. 11 bushel difference in performance in spring wheats that we test in the state, 12 bushel difference between high and low yielding winter wheat, 15 bushels in soybean varieties. So when you talk about soybean management, variety selection is right up there. Corn, the average yield difference over the last 2 years has been 49 bushel difference in performance in our trials in corn. So whenever you talk about making routine management decisions, hybrid variety selection at the beginning of the year, even before you get in the field, is something that we need to consider, and it'll help towards profitability at the end of the year.